Ladies and gentlemen, European empire is a myth. We hear a lot about it on both sides of the political spectrum. Some on the left like to talk about the vile white oppressors raping and murdering their way across the world. Resurgent white nationalists in Europe and the United States don't really disagree with this, though they too tell the story differently. Either explicitly or in thinly veiled terms, they like to talk about the natural superiority of white folks, and they see European empire as proof of concept. In truth, both of these groups are getting the story wrong. What they're really talking about isn't European empire, it's British empire. Now, I'm not claiming that other European countries didn't do evil stuff. They absolutely did. The Belgian Congo is perhaps the most horrific example. But almost all of these crimes came in the context of the British Empire, or British world system that ran the world throughout the 19th century. The independent country of Belgium itself was set up by the British in 1831, mostly to keep a potential launching pad for invasions of England out of the hands of other European powers. I can guess that the big exception you may be thinking of now would be the Americas. From the 1500s on, the Spanish and Portuguese empires viciously exploited those continents, committing many horrible crimes and introducing the diseases that probably wiped out 90% of the indigenous population on 2 continents. If you dive into the details, though, it's clear that this story of European domination is overblown as well. It's only in the 19th century that Europe began to seriously exploit the interiors of the American continents. And where was all that cotton produced in the American South and sugar produced in Brazil actually going? It was going into the markets of the British world system that financed those American slave empires. And for everything else that we hear about under the title of European empire, the stories are very, very British. That includes the imperialist exploitation of China and India's hundreds of millions. It also includes the scramble for Africa that saw the world's biggest continent brutally carved up between European empires. All the other European empires were just following the British example in the 19th century, this period of the greatest British dominance. Other European countries got slices of Africa to brutalize, but it was only the British parts that made any money. Because the British write the history in the world's dominant language, we hear a lot about the Imperial Rivals they faced in the 19th century. These stories of great games in Africa and Asia are largely bullshit. The French had large, largely economically worthless tracts of land just across the Mediterranean in West Africa. They also had a few possessions in Asia. The British controlled all of the lucrative trade routes and much of the land between French Algeria and French Vietnam. The Russians did take over much of Central Asia in the 1800s, but there wasn't really much going on there, either economically or even in terms of people. The British controlled much of what little trade there was in Russian Central Asia, but that didn't stop them from using the Russian threat to justify swallowing up all of modern Pakistan, which was much more valuable territory. Russian armies in Central Asia were rarely larger than 2,000 or 3,000 people. British armies in Asia and in Africa often included hundreds of thousands of soldiers. This great game idea of a big competition between Russia and Britain in Asia is largely fantasy, and it always was. Europe was just another part of the British informal empire in the 19th century. The British miserably failed to manage this slice of informal empire well. The German natives made a spirited attempt to kick the British out and succeeded in ending the British Empire by losing 2 brutal world wars to them. That's what actually happened in the age of European imperialism. It wasn't some great battle between European rivals. It was a British system with some European copycats who largely failed to free their continent of British and later US domination. I think it's really important to get this story right because the British world system was replaced by the US world system, and we are now making a lot of the same mistakes. As the US system ages and decays, the clowns running it are getting obsessed with the same sorts of manufactured enemies that the British did. Some of these threats, like China for example, are more credible future threats than others, but none of them are really that important yet. Washington, D.C. tells itself that it needs to be more worried about China and Iran than the ever-accelerating series of mistakes that Washington, D.C. itself keeps making. I think demolishing the myth of European empire is a key part of correcting these modern mistakes. We need to stop blaming others for the screw-ups of the folks who have really been running the world over the past 270 years. First, it was the British world system, and now it's the US world system. If you want to know more about all of this, I suggest you pick up my new book, Avoiding the British Empire, available now on Amazon Kindle and in paperback form. Thanks for watching, please subscribe, and come back Tuesday when we will lay out why the First World War was really the British Empire's fault.